All right, so I am Tiffany Tiggis. I'm from the University Writing Center. I'm one of the administrators. So today I'm talking to y'all about managing group writing projects, specifically focused on your PSA project that you have due at the end of this semester. How many of you guys actually enjoy group projects? Whoa, okay. Well, we have more than usual. But for the majority of us, we don't really like group projects, maybe from past experience or where we had to do all the work ourselves. Or just, group projects are just known for having issues. Just whenever you're trying to get so many people working together for a common goal, something's going to go wrong. So today we're going to talk about strategies you can use for potentially avoiding those issues, maybe changing your mind on group projects in the future, and hopefully helping this one go smoother than projects have gone in the past. So when you first get that assignment, your initial question is more likely than not, where do I start? Because you're working with so many people, you might have multiple pieces to the assignment. I know for this assignment in particular, there's a lot of moving parts, a lot of different individual deadlines. So there's a couple things to remember right off the bat. The first is that this is a group assignment, so everybody needs to be involved. This is it kind of sounds like a no-brainer because, hey, it's a group assignment, but it is important to remember that everybody needs to be involved. You need to get everybody working together, and we'll talk about ways to hopefully help with that by assigning roles for the individual members of your group. You also want to keep a good attitude and open communication. The main part of this is the communication part, because if you communicate with your group like, hey, I'm not able to meet the deadlines that we set, or I'm having issues with this one area, I need some help. If you communicate with them earlier, you can avoid a lot of the common concerns with group projects where the group members don't communicate this sort of thing until 4 hours before the assignment's due or the day before, and that's really too late to be able to do anything about it at that point. So communicate with your group, let them know where you are and if you need any assistance. And then also start early, start now. I know y'all just got the assignments and it's not really due until December, right? So that sounds like it's way in the future and it's just now October and you have weeks and months before that deadline. But start early, that way you have time to troubleshoot if you need to, and reassess if you need to go in a different direction than you initially planned. You're giving yourself time to do that instead of rushing right at the end and just throwing something together. So one of the core aspects of group projects are group meetings, and these can also have their own sets of complications, just trying to get so many people to meet together for a common goal. So here's some things to keep in mind with the meetings in general. First of all, come prepared, kind of work out an agenda, know what you're going to be doing for that particular meeting, and have kind of a goal set for that meeting. That way you're not just like sitting around and just wondering what you're supposed to be doing. You actually have, okay, we have to meet this goal that we set beforehand. Gives you a direction and something to aim for when you meet. Use agendas to stay on topic. Agendas are super useful. You don't have to use like an agenda like this. You can use maybe a Google Doc, something that you all have access to. That way everybody can see what's expected for that meeting and what the next meetings will entail. Keep track of time and honor established limits. So if you set, okay, we're going to meet until 4, make sure you end at 4. That way everyone can trust, okay, I can schedule everything else around this meeting. It's not going to go on and on and on. I know that I can trust my fellow group members to honor what we established ahead of time. Also take detailed notes. This can help for both conflict resolution and just remembering in general what you talked about in the meeting. So say someone says, oh, you didn't assign me this. I don't know why you're expecting me to do this. You can pull up those notes and say, no, look, on this day we talked about this. We set these goals. We gave you this job, and you need to make sure and honor that expectation. And also just, of course, remembering what you talked about, because that could be difficult when you have so much else going on to remember what you talked about in each meeting. And then also, of course, respect team and class deadlines. So if you're approaching a deadline that you set either for your team or something that's due for your specific class, and you realize, oh, hey, I'm not going to meet this deadline, I need some extra time, communicate that with your group so that they can then adjust accordingly. So here's kind of an 8-step sort of deal. You don't have to follow these steps, word for word, but this is kind of what I would recommend for doing a project like this, for making sure that you're meeting all those individual checkpoints for the project. The first, of course, is that you know your team, and I'll give you time in just a minute to kind of work on that step. We'll talk about what else to do with that step. But that involves sharing contact information, making sure you know everybody that you're working with and you can get in touch with them. Then you'll want to plan the timeline, and that involves looking at the assignment itself and making sure you know when everything's due. You want to leave enough time to brainstorm and outline. You want to spend an entire meeting on that more likely than not to make sure that you have time to move between the just raw ideas and putting them into an outline that you can then turn into your project. You want to compose your first draft of the script and then the final version of the script and then storyboard it, leaving plenty of time between those so you're not rushing both of those projects. Those are individual assignments. And then filming the video and editing the video. These are two separate points here because you do want time to edit that video. It can be very time consuming, especially depending on what you plan on doing to it. You want to leave yourself enough time to actually make those changes. And then of course, reveling in success. This is an awesome step, but you also do have an assignment associated with this. I believe you have like a reflection. So you want to make sure and leave enough time to actually reflect and write that out and submit it. So breaking down these steps, you want to make sure, once again, exchange contact information. Make sure you have a steady way to contact everyone, something that you can rely on. Step one. Step two, think about where and when your first meeting is going to be. And when you determine this meeting place, think about both accessibility, like is it somewhere that everybody can get to? If you're meeting on campus, does everyone have access to campus all the time? Especially if you're meeting later in the evenings. If someone doesn't have a parking pass or the buses are running on those weird like hour time scales, you may not be able to meet on campus as easily as you might think. So you might want to meet at someone's apartment complex. But then that brings in the second consideration is that make sure that everyone feels safe meeting there. Because if you have those roadblocks to a meeting and someone doesn't feel safe or they can't get there, that'll just make the whole meeting process more complicated than it needs to be. So make sure that everyone can get there and that it's somewhere that people feel safe meeting. And then thirdly, think about how you might potentially resolve conflict if it is to arise. In the past, we've had groups say, okay, to potentially resolve conflict, we'll set arbitrary deadlines 3 days before the actual deadlines. So we have those 3 days to work with if someone doesn't do the work that they're supposed to be doing. So let's talk about what that first meeting is going to look like. So when you actually do meet up for the first time, wherever you've decided and whatever time you've decided, you'll want to define and delegate roles. So this is a really important step here because you'll be determining who's going to do what, and that way people both know what they're expected to do, and you can check in with that particular person to make sure they're getting their job done. So if you're thinking about what this video might entail, you might need somebody, for instance, who is going to edit the video. You might need to assign somebody to like manage the whole project and set those agendas. You might want to assign somebody to record information during your meetings. And for these smaller groups, it probably makes more sense to have each person be assigned multiple roles. But be thinking about what sort of roles each person's going to have. You also want to think about sort of the different people's strengths and maybe their weaknesses as well. Like for instance, if you know that you're not good at editing and you just don't like it, maybe you shouldn't assign yourself to be the editor for the written part of the project. Or if you know that you have trouble with time management, you might not want to be the project manager if you're trying to get everybody else to meet expected deadlines. And vice versa, if you have experience in a certain area, like say you edited for your school paper in the past, or you know particular like editing software, maybe that's a task for you to do. Maybe you want to experiment with that video software. Or maybe if that's something you want to learn and you're interested in that particular area, that might be a role for you to take on as well. So be considering that. And on top of this, also consider each group member's individual responsibilities beyond this class and beyond this assignment. For instance, if a group member is in a bunch of different organizations or is taking like 30 hours of classes this semester, I don't even think that's a thing, but you get the idea. They may not be able to devote as much time to this project as someone else in the group might be able to, so also take that into consideration as well. And then you also want to be reviewing the assignment together. Really carefully look over the different expectations for this assignment. There's a lot of parts to it. So like ask questions and set expectations. This is also the chance for you to ask your professor to clarify things if you need to. And just go ahead and figure out what is expected of me before I jump in and start doing this. So kind of some questions to consider in this first meeting. And this isn't a comprehensive list of all the questions you should be asking, but this is the type of questions you should be asking when you're determining what you need to be doing next for this project. So for instance, what are the due dates? When is everything due? Not just the final due date, but the individual dates in between now and then for when you have a draft due or when your storyboard's due. What's the ending product or products of the project? What is the storyboard supposed to look like? What is the video supposed to look like? What sort of does it have a specific length? Do you have any other specifications for it? Who's your audience is an incredibly important question to ask. I think for this project, your audience is other Texas A&M students, if I remember correctly. So that's important to know for how you're going to address them. And I mean, there's no one better to address than other people like yourself. So this is a great way to think, what would get my my attention? How would someone connect with me? And then think about how you might address them. So for instance, would you be using humor to connect with them? Would you be using more statistics and more things to back up your research? Think about how you might connect with your target audience. Also think, will you need research to support your points? I asked this question, but the answer is yes, you will. If you look at the rubric, I believe there's a section that's on how much research did you use to back up your points. So you want to make sure that each person knows to back up the points they're making with relevant research and that you're putting that into your video. And also, what are the expectations for form and formatting? Think about that as well. We kind of talked about that already. What's expected of you with that outline, with that storyboard, and with your final video product. So after you've determined kind of the parameters of the whole assignment itself, you'll want to make a basic plan for the entire project. Be thinking about it both individual deadlines and group deadlines. So for instance, when it's due for the class may not be when you want to have it done for your group. So you can have some time to work on and polish it up before you submit it. And then also establish expectations for the next step, which will be brainstorming and outlining. So we'll go ahead and talk about that, because by establishing expectations, you're basically kind of choosing a method for how you're going to do this. So it makes it easier when you actually get into the brainstorming, because everybody knows what to expect. So there's a lot of different ways you can go about brainstorming. People have different strategies and different approaches that they prefer. But we'll focus on what really applies for a group session. One way that people like to approach this often is to just have people throw out ideas, and you just write down what people say and then discuss them further. You also might want to make a list and then discuss each item on your list and kind of talk it through. What might this look like in a video format? What might this look like as a storyboard, and figure out if that's appropriate or not. And consider it from that perspective. And then, choose a method and commit to it for whatever you choose for your approach for brainstorming. Stick to that method. That'll make things easier as you go along. And then, of course, consider the type of communication. We talked about this. Since you're communicating via a video, what does that mean for how you plan for what sort of topic you're going to choose? What's easier to communicate visually as opposed to something that you might be writing for a paper? Think about your audience, of course, and think about the purpose. So the purpose would be, are you trying to persuade someone? Are you trying to amuse the people that are watching your video? Are you trying to convince them to see things from your perspective? That will determine what you include in the video itself and what sort of research you perform for the actual material of your video. So more brainstorming techniques. Make sure you don't hold back and don't be judgmental when you share ideas. There's no idea that's really too crazy. I mean, maybe, but usually even the craziest ideas you can adapt in some way to your project. So be open and listen to what everyone has to say, and often you can think through these in a logical way, like, is this actually going to work or not? And then determine if you want to use it for your video. Pick the strongest ideas and then discuss them further. So choose which ones you think are going to work best and talk about them, kind of see how they're going to really work functionally for this project. And then decide on your main points. Once you choose that topic, choose your main points. What is going to be the way that you back up this topic that you've chosen, or this argument that you're making? So I was talking to your professor about some potential topics, and some groups in the past have looked at maybe talking about bike routes, like that Texas A&M needs more bike routes for campus. Other topics might be the bus system maybe needs some work. Maybe you have something to say about that, or maybe you have something to say about the dog training that goes on campus. Think about maybe an issue that means something to you. So that you can then argue it and actually care about it, and do research for something that you care about and that you think that other folks might care about too. Do y'all have any potential ideas? Do you just want to throw some out that might work for a topic? Yeah, that'd be an excellent idea for sure. These are all great topics, and y'all just threw those out in 60 seconds. So you can think about this might be a good brainstorming session. You just threw out 3 ideas. If we were doing this in a group session all together, we might write those down and consider where those might go from there. And then decide on what main points you might use to back up those topics. So once you decide on those main points for your overarching topic, consider those subpoints. So for instance, if you're looking at covers for the bike racks, you might think, okay, it might rain, for instance. That's one of your points, is that when it rains, and it rains often in Texas, there's a subpoint right there. how often does it rain in Texas, maybe looking at the amount of rain we get in different seasons here at Texas A&M, how much of an issue is it? That might be your subpoints for backing up that main point that this is one use for it is when it rains. Another maybe subpoint might be, okay, it gets really, really hot, which makes the bikes really, really warm and difficult to like grab the handles when it's blazing hot. So how hot does it get in Texas? Sort of subpoints for that. So thinking about like not only your main points, you may have 3 or 4 main points, but how do you back those up with those subpoints? And when you're thinking about this, you're putting it into an outline, you're writing out that outline. So then you can look at the different pieces to your project and assign different people different parts of that project. So say like you have those different points, you have maybe one that's on rain and one that's on how hot it gets in Texas. You'll say, okay, you're going to research the rain, you're going to research the heat, and then we'll put that together and find the research needed for this and put it together into our project. And you also want to be making sure and dividing the work equitably. This is different than equally, so it might not be each person gets a section, but one person might have just the introduction and conclusion, for instance. They don't have their own section, but that's enough work as it is. Or maybe if someone is dedicated to editing the final project, then they might not need to do as much work initially because most of their work is going to come towards the end of the project. So just think about the time commitment involved for each of these sections and make sure that each person is getting something that they can manage with their roles and their own expectations. So composing a first draft, you've brainstormed, you've chosen your topic, you have your points, you have your subpoints, you've got that outline laid out. Oh, and one more thing about an outline too, it's probably good to have that in a Google Doc where everybody can access, so that way you can make sure and everybody can see it at the same time, know what sections are needed, know what they need to volunteer for, and also tweak it if they need to. But once you start working on that first draft, you'll need both a storyboard and a script. So what we're recommending is starting with that first draft of the script first before turning it into a storyboard. So it is going to be kind of a back and forth sort of deal though. As you're going back and forth between working on the script and the storyboard, you may have to go back and revise your script a little bit. But start with that first draft of the script, be turning that outline into a script itself. What's going to be said, who's going to say what's the scene going to look like, and be working out that script for your first draft. And then you'll, after looking at the script, after putting it together, after each person plugs in their research, plugs in their own sections, you'll put it all together, send it to the editor, they'll put it all together into one full script. You'll take another look at it. Everybody should read over that script, see does it make sense? Does this person say the same thing that I'm saying in my section? So maybe one of us needs to revise our sections. It'll make a lot more sense when you see it in its full context. And then you can go back and revise your outline and make that second draft of the script before you go into storyboarding. And then once again, storyboarding and script are going to kind of work in tandem, because if you get to the storyboard and you realize, oh hey, I can't storyboard this doesn't work, it's going to be especially hard to film that if you can't work it out in a storyboard fashion. So you might have to go back to that script, revise it a little bit, and then go back to storyboarding something that can actually be storyboarded. So it's not necessarily a linear sort of progression here, it is sort of a back and forth work. Just like you would do for writing a paper, you kind of go back and forth between the outline and the paper as well. So actually filming the video, kind of the fun part, I guess. There are some considerations to make when you're determining the actual filming portion of this project. So, for instance, where will you film? Will you only use one setting? Or are you going to kind of splice together multiple settings? Are you going to like maybe film yourself next to the bike racks on one side of campus and then maybe bike racks on the other side of campus? Are you going to film yourself in a classroom or in front of a building? How are you going to do this setting-wise? And also remember that videos don't need to be filmed in the order they're going to be later on. That can be taken care of in the editing process. So you can film things out of order, whatever's more accessible to you at the time. Just be thinking about each place that you're going to be filming. Also, are you going to need to have folks in your group act? Are they comfortable with that? Maybe there's some people in your group who have acting experience. Maybe there's some people who would hate the idea of acting and just want to be behind the camera. So be thinking about that too. Or thinking about maybe if you need to recruit any of your roommates or any of your friends to be actors, background actors or whatever for your project as well. Also, will you need any special equipment? And if you don't have this equipment, I mean, phones these days are just so sophisticated. You could probably just film with an iPhone camera at this point. But if you wanted to, go above and beyond and film with something even cooler, you can rent equipment from the annex. You can rent actual videography equipment for a couple hours if you wanted to. So that's there for your use as well. Another note too is that the annex has a one-button studio and a recording studio over there. I don't know if y'all are familiar with that, but they have those soundproof rooms that you can go in. let me tell you, those are really, really sensitive microphones in there. Like you can make a lot of noises with your mouth when you talk that you don't realize you make until you're in one of those rooms and it's picking up every little thing. But barring that, it is a really, really great resource to use, and it might be great if you're doing like a voiceover, for instance, or if you want to, they have like one of those green screens where you can film and then put something behind you. So if you want to do that as well, that's all available for you over there. And they have a ton of people over there who know how to work the equipment, and they can help you out with that also and walk you through it. And I mean, I know this is one assignment for one class, but you'd be picking up skills that you might be able to use again in the future and say like, hey, I know how to use these these different editing softwares, and you can put that on your resume. Looks great for future job positions if you want to go ahead and learn that program. There's also both Macs and PCs over there. This is the 6th floor of the Evans Annex. The Macs and PCs have all sorts of different video editing software on there. It's a really great resource if you want to really get in and edit your videos using their software. You shouldn't have to purchase anything on your own. So finally, of course, editing the video, we already talked about this. Think about who's going to be doing the editing and how much editing is going to be required. Like, are you splicing different pieces together from different points in time? Are you doing any overlays with it? Do you need any special effects? And with special effects, I don't necessarily mean like, the green screen or green suited people that you project actors' faces over. It can also mean things like different text that appears on the screen, if you're having that appear. If you're splicing together, moving pieces around, that's special effects. If you're moving between one scene and the next and you want to have a cool fade, if you want to have like a title page at the beginning, all those are special effects that you can do in these programs. It's actually a lot easier than it looks, and it's really crazy fun too. You can have different like layers, and you can have a video and then layer music over it too. It's awesome. I would really recommend playing around with it if you have the time. But be thinking about that because it does take some time to get it right. And I'm sure they're not expecting this to be, a perfect video and its final quality, like a professionally made video. But if you want to play around with special effects, leave yourself enough time to do that. So then finally, step 8, you're done. So this is the time when you need to be thinking about writing your reflection. So it helps to take notes throughout the project if you want to write down how you think everything's going. You're also going to be writing peer reviews on your fellow group members. So say something really annoys you about a group member early in like tomorrow, you might want to write that down so you can put that in their reflection and your reflection on their progress later. And then also think about your strengths and weaknesses throughout the project. So things to think about might be, where did I excel here? Where might I need to work on in the future? Did I leave myself enough time to work on this, or might I need to adjust the time frame for my future group projects? Think about these things, and these are things that you can put in your reflection and that you can also use to reassess how you approach future group projects. So say you were the editor this time and you absolutely hated it. So you might never want to be the editor again. So next time you can say to your next group, hey, I hate editing, I'm horrible at it, let's let somebody else do that. So this is a really great chance for you to approach future group projects with a better mindset and more information about your own performance in groups. So, any questions about the group project, group work in general? Yeah. Storyboarding, that can mean different things depending on the assignment. What I've seen it mean in the past is you actually do little sketches of the different scenes. So you'll you might have little boxes and you'll have just a brief description underneath, like John tells Mary about the problem with bikes on campus, and you might have a little stick figure of John over here, a little stick figure of Mary over here. It's just basically saying how it's going to look. It gives you a visual representation before you actually shoot it. And it usually doesn't need to be too complex, and if you have an artist in your group, go for it, but I can imagine that it doesn't really matter how complex it is. If you're setting one of your group meetings, you might want to set a group meeting with the Writing Center and say, hey, we're meeting at the Writing Center today, and kind of make a group along with the consultant who's there, who could help you out with the whole process. So our consultants, we're all peer tutors, so we're all students like you guys. So what you'll do if you want to make an appointment over at Evans is you go to writingcenter.tamu.edu and click on Make an Appointment. And once you click that, it'll ask you to sign in with your username and password. And then from there, you can say, hey, I want a group appointment. I want to meet face-to-face. Here's the details of my assignment. And then set up the appointment that way. So here's our contact information. Okay, well, thank you all so much for your attention today. Y'all have a great day, and good luck with that PSA assignment and with your future assignments as well.